And guess what, y'all? We've walked together, we've prayed together, we've cried together. His family is mine and mine is his. I want y'all to stand to your feet for the Honorable Mayor, Mr. John Giles, who is the mayor of the city of Mesa.
I'll take the secular podium, right? Pastor Wade, as he indicated, he's a member of my family, and he is my pastor, and I am no stranger to Mount Calvary Church. I want you to know that. I love it here. This is where there's no place I'd rather worship than right here at Mount Calvary. But what I am a stranger to, some of you might know this, is the Democratic Party. I am born and raised a bright red Republican. And so I do feel a little out of place still as I come out and advocate for the Vice President and try to open the eyes and remind people of what was the consensus 4 years ago, that we would never make that mistake again. And now, for some reason, our country is on at the precipice of making, fool me once, shame on me. Switch that around. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So that's the situation we're confronted with. I had the privilege of just a few days ago being invited to be on the Lawrence O'Donnell show on MSNBC. And you might ask yourself, why do they want to talk to the mayor of Mesa, Arizona on a national media show? And so here's the question that he posed to me when I came on camera. He said, Mayor, here's my story. I've voted in several presidential elections. It's always been in a state like New York or California or Texas, where frankly, my vote did not matter. He said, I am so envious of you and the people of Arizona. He said, do the people of Arizona have an appreciation for how important their vote is and how critical a state that you guys are going to pick our president? Do the people of Arizona appreciate that and know it? What should I have said? I think we do, right? But if we do, that means that we've got to really appreciate the urgency that is incumbent on all of us to not drop the ball in this amazing opportunity that we have. This is going to come down to who gets out the vote. We all know that, right? So it's going to come down to making sure that we get that green envelope in the mailbox, and for our adult children and for our elderly parents and for our cousins and for our neighbors and for anybody that we think that we have any type of a social network or any type of influence on. We have to all own that responsibility. And unless we do that, things are at great risk of not going well in our community and in our state. So I hope and I pray in this sacred place in Mesa, Arizona, that we will all own that responsibility, that we'll all own the fact that the future of our country and our state and our city is in our hands. And we have been blessed with this amazing responsibility as voters in Arizona to have an oversized voice. And that's something that I hope, to answer Lawrence O'Donnell's question, yes, sir, we appreciate it and we're going to show up, us and everybody that we know. So I'm excited to be a part of that. I feel so privileged to have a voice and to have the opportunity to try to have some influence in this election, because it is one of the elections of our lifetime.
Well, good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on, I guess, what time we all think it is. So I wanted to say before I even get started here, I have already voted. And I got that nice note back today from the county recorder's office that not only has my ballot been received, but it's also been counted. So I want to make sure that all of us, as we talk about what's important and what's at stake in this country with this upcoming election on November 5th, please make sure, as our speakers before have talked to you about, Mayor Giles, Councilmember Hodge Washington, that you vote. Because if you don't vote, you are not going to have a say in the future of this country. You are not going to be able to stop a lot of the harm that we know will be wreaked upon our country if a certain person gets returned to the Oval Office. A person, frankly, from my perspective, once you have actually started an insurrection on January 6th of 2021, you should not be anywhere near the White House for the rest of your natural-born life, especially not sitting inside the Oval Office. as Councilmember Hodge talked about, one of the biggest concerns we have now is that women have fewer freedoms now than they would have. Their daughters have fewer freedoms. Their granddaughters will have fewer freedoms than women who had 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that is obviously, simply put, completely unacceptable. We have to make sure that we do everything we can in our power to ensure that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz end up in the White House this coming January 20th. But I wanted to make sure to talk about some very important points, because many times you turn on the TV and people are yelling back and forth at one another. We don't always have time to fact-check people in real time, but as we know, only one candidate will actually submit to actually being fact-checked. I should also say, as a person who's now been in public office for nearly 13 years, I have never actually been able to tell a person, I will do an interview with you provided you don't fact-check me. That should pretty much tell you that whenever someone's lips are moving, they're probably lying if that's the case. I am happy to be fact-checked. But let's actually talk about some facts here this evening, just so we all have something to talk about, and frankly, something to share with our friends and our family and our neighbors. For people who might still be on the fence, for people who don't know if they're going to vote, let's talk about some very important facts that will happen if Donald Trump ends up back in the White House. So he's talked about this very publicly just over the last week alone, that he wants to enact a new tax. I like to call it a Trump tax, personally. Not just because I like alliteration, but because it happens to also be true. He wants to enact this Trump tax on everyday goods that Arizona families rely on, which would raise costs on typical middle-class families by nearly $4,000 a year. Can anyone in this room afford to continue to pay $4,000 more per year for your average stuff, for going to the grocery store for eggs and bacon and everything else? Exactly. Well, yeah, if I was a billionaire, I'm not even sure if he actually is a billionaire, but if I was, maybe I would. But the fact of the matter is, he's talking about raising taxes on each and every person in this room while handing out massive tax breaks to big corporations and his billionaire friends who don't need the tax breaks anyway. The experts, all of the economists, any of them who actually have any real reputation, have talked about that Donald Trump's plans would cost America over 3 million jobs. It would cost as much as $10.5 trillion over the next decade alone. And if he's talking about inflation right now, his plan, according to every reputable economist, would send inflation skyrocketing in the next 10, 15 years. Meanwhile, our current Vice President, Kamala Harris, recently released her opportunity agenda for black men, focused on equipping them with the tools to achieve financial freedom, lowering their costs to help them provide for themselves and their families, and for protecting their rights. And I want to make sure also to note this, since I just talked about the opportunity agenda for black men. Everyone in this room, and I see this room is probably about 60-40 women, we all know in this room, without me even saying it, that we know that Vice President Harris has the agenda that's really going to take care of women in this country, don't we? That's something that probably doesn't even need to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway since we're up here in church. So for Vice President Harris, as we all know, getting by is not enough. It's about making sure that people, that black men, black women, and each and every American has the opportunity to get ahead, has the opportunity to thrive, and to be change agents in communities across this nation. Which is why all of us in this room, and why all Arizonans and all Americans are going to vote her into office as the next president of the United States this coming November 5th. So I'm going to go ahead and step aside here. I promise this would be a little bit short tonight, but I want to make sure that I can introduce our next speaker this evening, who just arrived, which is United States Senator Cory Booker. I've got to tell you, though, very quickly in about a minute or so, my own personal story, though, with U.S. Senator Cory Booker, because he's not just simply a person that I admire and someone who I consider to be a role model, but he's someone who's had a very profound impact on my own life. So back in 2005, when I was first running for the city council in Tempe at the age of 26, my father, who knew I'd always been interested in politics, who worked under 3 different mayors in New York City, when I was a child. So I grew up hearing about politics all the time and about matters of public policy. But one of the first things he said to me is, son, do you know anything about actually running for the city council? And what that actually takes, and what you actually have to do, the door knocking, the fundraising, and the tireless amount of work. And I said, well, I have an idea. He said, well, I know something you should actually do. There's a documentary about a young man who's running for mayor in the city of Newark named Cory Booker. And you should watch this documentary called Street Fight. And it will tell you everything you know about what a tough race is and what you have to do to be successful in the world of politics. Not only have I watched that DVD, I still have the DVD. And I'm happy to lend it to anyone after here who wants to take a look at it themselves if you haven't seen it. But after that, I had an opportunity to watch the documentary about him, Brick City, from when he actually was mayor of Newark and all the work he did, turning that city around and doing an incredible job that inevitably landed him in the United States Senate. But I want to tell you before I close here the most personal story I have about Senator Booker. So a close personal friend of both of ours, when I won the mayor's race back in March of 2020, said to me, Cory, I want to make sure that you do something for me in the next couple of days. You're going to get a phone call from someone. I'm not going to tell you who the phone call's coming from, which always scares you when you're in politics when someone says they're going to call you and they can't tell you who it is. But he said, I want you to make sure that if you see a number that pops up on your phone and you don't recognize it, answer the phone, whatever you do. So on a Sunday afternoon, I actually got up for a second and went to the kitchen. 5 minutes later, I get back from the kitchen, and there's a voicemail on my phone from a gentleman with a 917 area code. And I'm wondering, who could this have been? So, of course, I pick up my phone and turn the voicemail on, and who is it except for U.S. Senator Cory Booker, saying congratulations on being elected as the next mayor of the city of Tempe. By the way, I still have that voicemail, too. I still keep it, and I actually play it for people periodically to prove that I'm not just making it up. But what really impressed me was it wasn't just simply a phone call and a voicemail that he left, because what he said was, if you have a few minutes, please call me back. And so I called him back. And for the next 15 minutes, we were on the phone talking about his experiences as mayor of Newark, my time as a member of the city council in Tempe, and trying to figure out what I was going to do as the new mayor of the city of Tempe. And it wasn't just him having a conversation and giving me a pep talk. When we talk about lifting each other up, that's exactly what this man did for me. What he told me was, you're a young black man, you are starting in the job of your life, and if I can ever be helpful to you in any way, I am here for you. My Rolodex is now your Rolodex. You need to know someone at a major foundation like the Ford Foundation, I will make that connection personally for you. And this was just incredibly impressive to me, and it speaks wonders about who this man is and what he's done to continue to fight for us for New Jersey in the United States Senate, but what he's going to continue to do in this world and how he's going to continue to make sure that Kamala Harris becomes our next president. So with no further ado, I'd like to turn it over to a man who's a champion for black Americans, who's a champion for all Americans, a role model of mine, and a personal hero, United States Senator Cory Booker.
Wow, I should just drop the mic here and just be done with it. I'm so pleased everybody sit down, especially these incredible elected officials. I should say mayors, plural. I've been out to Arizona quite a bit. When I first used to come out here, I had to run for my life because Arizona State used to beat up on Stanford in those days, and I still have some scars on my back. But it's really good to be here on a day that I've been running since our plane landed, from Republicans for Harris, Walz, and Gallego, to union halls, to campaign headquarters. We still have more events to go to, but I'm just so excited to be in the pastor's church again, and just to say to you, Pastor, I really do believe that before you tell me about your religion, first show it to me in how you treat other people. I'm a real big believer that faith without works is dead. And you really are one of those folks who know that a church actually is not four walls. It's the body of Christ, what you do in this world and how you affect people's lives. So, Pastor, thank you very much. Look, we're all in this together. We're all connected. And the overly gracious introduction, Cory, that I got is indicative of this community. I always say what you say about other people, good or bad, is more of a reflection of who you are than who you're talking about. And this idea that we're all in this together in this election for me really is very emotionally moving. I know what we had the 4 years that Donald Trump was president of the United States, and I've known Donald Trump for years and years, well before he became president, because he's from the New Jersey area. I know the businesses that he bankrupted through his, I believe, corrupt practices when he ran a casino. I know some of the people he demeaned and degraded very personally, but years before he became president of the United States. But what's stunning to me right now is to see so many Republicans that served with him, from defense secretaries to his chief of staff to his vice president, people from the Senate like Jeff Flake from out here or Mitt Romney, so many people coming out to tell the truth about their stories and their experiences with him. But to me, it's not just about what we're running against, it's really about what we're running for. And it's not just personified in Kamala Harris. She is a dear friend of mine. I consider her more of a sister than a friend. Back when I was the only African American in the Democratic caucus in the Senate, I did a little Spike Lee to her, and I said, please, baby, baby, please, baby, baby, please, run for the United States Senate, please. And she did. She did not run for governor of California. She ran for the Senate, and she and I got to be this incredible dynamic duo. We sat together at the end on the Judiciary Committee, the two of the first blacks ever to be on the Judiciary Committee, and we sat side by side. And that's why I'm enjoying myself, because all these little clips of her going in on, cabinet secretaries and Supreme Court justices, you could just see me sitting there smiling as she does her thing. But I know her character, I know her spirit, I know how she loves people. I know how she knows you can't lead the people if you don't love the people. I know that she believes that if you vote differently than I do, you have the same dignity and the same humanity, and that we are invested in each other. I know how whip smart she is. I know policies she's going to pursue because I had this privilege of working on a lot of the same legislation with her when we were both in the Senate, things like the child tax credit. Then she got moved on up like George Jefferson to the vice presidency. And then she and I got to partner from the White House to the Senate and get things done like the child tax credit, which cut child poverty for that year in half. And now I get to talk with her. I was talking to some of her advisors yesterday about getting ready, should she win in 19 days, about how we can hit the ground running and continue to do things to make this country a better place. Now, I know the headlines like to cover things that we're talking about, important issues, from immigration to God bless America, women's reproductive rights. But I want to tell you just really quickly, there's so many things that we don't hear about in the headlines that I've had the privilege of working with her on, and I know she cares about. Things we don't talk about often. Like, there is, I campaigned earlier, or at least now last month, in Flint, Michigan, and they had a horrible water crisis there. Well, what most Americans don't know is that when the children in Flint, Michigan had these elevated blood lead levels, which creates lead poisoning, which permanently damages the brain, most Americans didn't know that there were over 3,000 cities and towns, jurisdictions, where the children had more than twice the blood lead levels, because we had really bad problems with pipes in this country. Well, when Kamala Harris, we founded the Environmental Justice Caucus, now she's vice president, these big bills, we made sure that there was billions of dollars put in the federal budget so that every community can get the resources they need to get those lead pipes out of the ground. Newark has no more lead pipes. And so I often go around, they've got me going to barber shops, and I know people don't believe that. Mayor, can I get a witness? But I'm often talking to African Americans and others with my receipts about the extraordinary things that we have done to expand opportunity for all that maybe people don't know about. But I suspect that we're all here now, not because we need convincing, But we know we have a role to do in these last 19 days in a state where early voting's already began and people can go right to the polls. And for me, this is not about her. It's really not. It's about what we are going to do in the cause of our country, how we're going to give the best measure of our devotion to this nation. Now, I think very long and hard about the traditions in my family, which I imagine, no matter what your background here in this great church, you have a lot of the same traditions. My grandparents, who were big forces in my life, raised us to make sure that we do everything we can to continue the democratic traditions of our family, which is voting, organizing, getting involved. My grandfather was a Republican, like most blacks were, before the Great Depression, and then moved to Michigan and became a union organizer, bragged till he died about converting 14 districts from Republican to Democrat. And he said, we became Democrats because this was the party of union rights. This was the party of workers' rights. It was a party of women's rights. It was a party of civil rights. It was the party of Medicaid and Medicare. It was a party of Social Security. It was a party of public education and public schools. And my grandfather would go on and on and on and on. And what's extraordinary about my grandfather, he loved his job on the assembly lines, but he also was an entrepreneur. He said, this is a nation where everybody should have a chance. If they want to start a business. He started a pool hall, then a laundromat, then this incredible gas station. And then my grandfather in Detroit ran numbers, too. He ran numbers. Yes, he did. The statute of limitations is over, y'all. The last time I'm in church, I can't lie to y'all. Some of my generational wealth might be like the Kennedys, when they did a little alcohol thing back in the Prohibition. In that movie, Street Fight, what they didn't have on film was that I got word that my grandfather died during that election. And many of us have lost people. I was told to call my grandfather, and I couldn't because I was weeping, I was crying. And then I got this warm feeling come over me because my grandfather's last words to me, I thought it was dementia, I thought he didn't recognize me, was that I loved you, I love your children, and I love your grandchildren. And I thought he was confusing me for my uncle, because I'm what J.D. Vance calls a childless cat person. I think we're just perfect. Perfect, okay, sorry. But I suddenly got this warmth over me because I thought a lot about this idea that my grandfather loved so hard that he loved generations yet unborn. I had this moment at the Apollo Theater in Harlem with a guy who was an atheist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, a friend of mine, where we got to discuss for a podcast issues of science. I believe in science. I'm glad Democrats believe in science. And he said something spiritual that I want to tell you. He said to me, he goes, Cory, he's an atheist, but he goes, I want to bond with you over this spirituality because when you look at the sun that you see is really not there. It's really 8 minutes more moved because it takes the light 8 minutes to get to you. Now, when you look at the stars, they're hundreds of millions of light years away. Your ancestors' were looking at those stars, but many of them had died out millions of years ago. But you see them as if they're there because that light goes on forever. It's been traveling for millions of years. The light can never be, the star dies out, but the light and the warmth it gives off while it's alive goes on forever. And then he said to me, we're all stardust. My grandfather taught me that while you are alive, you do everything you can. Give to this nation, love your neighbor, help other people, organize, connect, create community, because that love that you create while you're alive will go on forever. And the question he said to me is, how boldly will you live? How much will you answer the call to love? How much will you stand up when it's your time to serve? How much will you show acts of kindness and grace to others? How much can you every single day put love out there? And then when it comes to election time, it's not about politics. It's about planting those seeds for the future. Because the changes that are made, one lead pipe out of the ground is going to ensure that children yet unborn have clean water, have clean air, have great public schools, have good jobs, can keep more of their paycheck. What we are doing now in these last 19 days will be felt for generations to come, because I hate to tell you, this election is going to be so small, so narrow, up and down the ballot, so key, that the investments you make in this election are going to pay dividends for decades and generations to come. And so I want to end with you for a call on that spirit. I want to give you a call on that spirit that was given to me by someone you'll recognize. And to tell you what the call is I have to take you to this incredible day on the United States Senate floor, a little behind the scenes, on the day that we were confirming Ketanji Brown Jackson. Now, 99 senators had voted, and we're waiting around for one more senator to vote. And he was late, a Republican senator, a friend of mine. I don't care what side of the aisle you are, you're going to have to deal with my love. And a Republican senator making 99 senators wait. I think it was like over an hour. I'm pacing the Senate floor, really working hard, trying not to cry. This beautiful moment, confirming the first African American to the Supreme Court. I'm working hard, trying not to cry, because my staff will only give me one public cry a month. And, and I had already exceeded my cry for the month. So I was sitting there trying to hold it together, and this man comes over to me. This guy has got more titles than the Newark Public Library, Reverend Dr. Senator Raphael Warnock. He comes over to me and he's like, Brother Booker, looks like you're struggling a little bit. And I'm like, yes, I am. He goes, looks like you need some prayer, brother. And we started laughing. And now, we both grew up in matriarchal families. As much as I talk about my grandfather, my families have been run by generations of extraordinary women, and Warnock as well. And so when we hear a woman summon us, we instinctively, reflexively go towards the summoning woman. And this summoning woman, the presiding officer of the United States Senate on that historic day, was none other than the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala is sitting in the presiding officer's seat, this big ornate seat, big dais here, and over her e pluribus unum, what a great hallmark for a nation, amazing. Now, for those of the Americans that watch C-SPAN, all 38 people in America that watch C-SPAN, they will know that you watch it, when senators go to talk to the presiding officer, they lean down because you're not allowed to be higher. They have to be the highest person in the Senate. So you'll see people leaning over. So picture this right now. Me and Warnock go over and kneel before the altar of Kamala Harris. We are literally on our knees. I know God before me, Pastor. I wasn't worshiping in a religious sense, but I was paying my respects to the presiding officer, and I'm on my knees to Kamala Harris with Warnock next to me, and Kamala looks down at us and says, gentlemen, this is a historic moment. Now, I know she was talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson, but I'm a nerd, and I know my history, and I'm thinking to myself, this might be a historic moment, because this might be the first time in American history that 3 black people were together on the Senate floor. I mean, I'm only the 4th black person ever elected. I was doing my math. Is this the first time? And so she goes, fellas, such an important moment in history. What I want you two to do is, you all, while we're waiting here, should go and write a letter to a little girl to tell her what it was like to be on the Senate floor in this moment. And I thought that was powerful. I thought about it. And she didn't think, I'm not sure if she thought we were convinced, even though we reflexively will do what the woman tells us to do. But she opens up her binder for the day, and there is her, the binder that she keeps her briefing documents and her schedule. And in the back of it, there's 2 pieces of paper in this little folder. And she pulls out these 2 pieces of stationery. And they're embossed with the seal of the Vice President of the United States. And in big letters, it's her name, Kamala Harris. And she says, gentlemen, you should write that letter to a little girl on my stationery. And she hands each of us a piece of this stationery, which at that point, Warnock puts his hand on me and says, don't you cry, Booker, don't you cry. Now, Reverend Raphael Warnock is a disciplined, dutiful United States senator. So he does exactly what he's told. He marches over to this historic desk from the 1800s, his assigned desk, and he sits down and he pens the most beautiful letter to his 5-year-old daughter. If you ever meet him, ask him about the letter. Tell him I told him about it. And it's a beautiful letter. Now me, I'm from Jersey. And I remind you, childless cat man. I don't have an easy person to write the letter to, so I'm a little bit stumped. It's like Stanford again. I got this procrastination problem going on, and I'm thinking about who do I write this letter to? Who do I write this letter to? And then the last senator comes in and votes. She's on the bench. And a week goes by. I still have not written my letter. It's terrible. It's weighing on me. The stationery every day gets heavier and heavier. Who am I going to write a letter to on this stationery? Another week passes by. No letter. And then one day I'm lying in my bed. In those magical moments we've all had where we wake up like 5 minutes before our alarm goes off, and we have this moment of peace, and we have these profound thoughts. And here I'm thinking about Kamala Harris has asked me to write my letter, and I haven't written my letter yet. And then, Pastor, I remember my church. Pastor said, faith without works is dead. Pastor said, you can't pray right and walk wrong. Pastor said, let the work I do speak for me. We tell our truth every day, not by what we say or what we write, but what we do. And all of us here, we may not have a physical letter from our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents, but all of us are here because of the letter that they wrote. The life they lived is the letter that they wrote. Kamala Harris asked me to write my letter, but she was probably calling on me in a metaphorical way to live your life as your testimony to who you are. Write your letter. And I'm going to share with you right now her call. 19 days left. Write your letter. Write your letter like your ancestors wrote. Because your ancestors wrote us all letters. They didn't always use ink. Sometimes they used tears. Sometimes they used sweat. Sometimes they used blood. Write your letter like they did, and what will your letter say? I ask you in these last 19 days, when this nation needs your love, where this nation needs your struggle, where a nation needs your work, to write your letter and let that letter speak about peace and justice. Let it speak about reproductive rights and public education. Let it speak about making a nation that secures democracy for generations yet to come. Make your letter say something. Testify in that letter to what you do. Because if you write that letter, I promise you, Arizona, I promise you, for these next 19 days, if every day you fill it up with love and work and struggle, do more than what's asked or required of you, I think if we all write that letter, as narrow as this election's going to be, I think the last sentence is going to say something like, we won, baby, we won. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Pastor, thank you. Thank you. Let's get the souls to the polls, people.
We're going to take one. All right, listen real quick. I need everybody to stand. Miss Naya, if you would come, we want to make sure that we get this picture so that we can send it to make sure that Senator Booker's people send the information out. We want people to know that we came for business in Arizona. Yes. Hey, I can't. Yes, indeed. Listen, come on. I need our mayors and senators. Y'all can go right on up. Y'all can go ahead and take the picture. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Put it right. I was at the barber shop this morning.
All right. I want to. Let me.
Pastor, come on in.
Okay. Yes, indeed.